Bitcoin's being lively, showing signs of life after dropping to what I believe might be a cyclical low. So I'm cautiously long right now. Um, US equities in a holding pattern, basically seeing how much stimulus they can hold out for. And I'm sort of caught in between long and short. But once something becomes apparent, I will change my mind and switch. Aussie yen dependably gravity bound. And the pound has not shown any sign of recovering yet. Oil might be on its way up too. Gold, paradoxically, staying lowish. Let's make the see. Like the light gray text is it's less obtrusive, but on a computer screen when you're streaming, you want to be able to see the numbers. And the CAD's hanging up there. The loonie crumbled along with the Aussie. So actually, one of the more interesting trades that I'm in now is the Aussie to loonie, which it looks like it has a way to go up to retrace. There isn't really, I think, any good fundamental reason to prefer one over the other. So I'm expecting some good interband cyclical trades for those two. All right. For the benefit of my single anonymous viewer, I am going to start the educational portion here. Principle number 7, I didn't have a chance to talk about it last time. It's all set up and I sort of got distracted and ahead of myself. Oh, now I'm dropping frames. And I lost my stats. What's going on? All right, so I dropped some frames when I moved that over. Good to know. Principle number 7 is stick with the plan. You got an idea for something you want to do a stream, even though you aren't particularly eloquent or funny or interesting, but you want to do it, just do it. Stick with the plan. You're not getting any viewers. You're going live on Twitch when Twitch is just for games, and maybe you should be going live on YouTube instead. Well, you could do that, but for a while, stick with the plan. You got a system that works, stick with it. You got orange-faced, cotton candy-haired president. Don't change horses in midstream. A bad plan is better than no plan at all. This is something that chess players know, something that I think every good game player knows. You need to have a plan, even if it's not the best plan. You can't waste too much time trying to come up with a perfect plan when time is of the essence. Perfect is the enemy of good. And that's why Trump will probably get reelected, unless this recession turns into a depression that lasts through to November, in which case his goose is thoroughly cooked. But I put this principle could have been the number 2 principle. It's that important because failing to stick to a plan once it's been established, has been the ruin of many, many otherwise excellent traders and excellent trading plans for that matter. You can have a great plan, but if you don't follow it, it's useless. This, I think, is something that can be learned, but if it's something that you continually break, it may be fundamentally something disjointed or at odds in your personality and with the mentality that you need to be able to trade. So if you find it difficult to stick to your plan, it's either because you have a lack of confidence in your own abilities, a lack of confidence in the plan itself, or you're not expressing your creative force in the right way. Changing things to see what happens, which is curiosity, which is a good personality trait, but you need to be able to mold that curiosity and sequester it. Express it through good uh, partitioning so that you have a main system, which is the plan, and you make changes to subsidiary system, which remains behind the scenes, preferably in a demo account. And you merge those two only when it's appropriate. All right, let's take a look at BabyPips Rehab Chapter 4, which is called Who Trades Forex? You can reach that chapter by going to babypips.com/learn/forex/forex-market-structure. It seems like they made some structural changes to this course to make it better. I approve of most of the changes that have been made to the BabyPips course. It's much better than when I first took it. But some things don't make sense. Like this chapter ends with a reference to the when to trade Forex lesson, which happened previously. So that didn't make sense. As well, Forex market structure and looking at who trades Forex, I would say two different topics. But they've been merged in this case. I don't think it's a problem. But I've dealt with some of these topics I dealt with in a previous video, and I'll reference it later. All right, what's Forex market structure? This chapter begins by comparing or taking a look, examining the market structure of the stock market, essentially the United States equities market. And it claims that most people are familiar with that stock market, with the stock market and its market structure, which I put a big red X beside because I would argue most people are not familiar with it, especially people coming to Forex for the first time. I don't think that you can necessarily say that people understand how the stock market necessarily works. But the rest of these points are true. The stock market is centralized. There's one price. It's controlled by the market and the market maker. In order to prevent an imbalance of buyers or sellers, in order to keep their inventory relatively balanced, the quote unquote specialist, who is the market maker, can widen the spread, which increases the transaction cost and discourages one side from entering the market. So if you need to unload particular security or issue, you have an imbalance of stock, you widen the spread for one side until that imbalance evens out, and then you narrow the spread again. This is manipulation. It's not necessarily illegal, depending on the market. Now, the Forex market is decentralized, and so the BabyPips a point that they make fairly regularly is that since there's no single price and quotes can vary from dealer to dealer, the competition between dealers keeps everything honest and gives you the best price. I could almost put a red X beside that because in practice, there's a lot of collusion, and retail traders, they always get the worst prices. You should expect that. I don't think that the decentralized nature of Forex trading necessarily makes it a more what is the opposite of the word manipulated? More independent? Anyway, less manipulated? I don't think so. I don't know anybody who thinks that, any trader who thinks that Forex is synonymous with less manipulation. No way. Forex market hierarchy. At the bottom of this slide, you can see a link here to YouTube, and that is a Q, I think. IQ, KK, capital S, capital L, capital N. I think that's an I. Anyway, if you go to evidence-based FX on YouTube and look at the video called Who Trades, I go through a lot of this in greater detail than the BabyPips material. And for the most part, I don't dispute a lot of it. Why did I put a red X here? Was that a mistake? Is that an oversight? There's nothing that's untrue about that. Let's go back. I'm going to remove that red X. Interesting, I make a change here. It doesn't show up there. Not while I'm presenting. Anyway, ignore this red X over here. The top of the Forex market hierarchy is occupied by major banks. You've got the electronic brokering services, Reuters dealing, who provide rates and liquidity to the interbank market. Under that, you have medium-sized and small banks who provide services to retail market makers, retail, ECNs, electronic communication networks, hedge funds, and commercial companies. And these companies don't have a tight credit relationship with the interbank members, so they have to do their transactions through commercial banks. The rates are higher and more expensive, and it continues this way down the ladder. Each successive level of access gives you worse prices and more expensive transaction costs. At the bottom are the retail traders, people like me, probably you. But the actual rates depend on the credit relationships between parties. So the more trustworthy the counterparty, the better rates they should be able to expect. Again, check out that video if you want to learn more about that. Try to avoid repetition. Market players. I mean, the Forex market as such sort of originated in 1970, in the 1970s, shortly after the collapse of the Bretton Woods system. And in 1995, the first retail broker started to appear on the scene. So between that period, theoretically, only big guys could afford to trade currencies. The minimum requirement to be able to trade the market was in not just millions of dollars, but tens of millions. BabyPips says between 10 and 50 million, which seems high, but I don't know. I don't know anything about that period in history. The major players, again, sort of repeating itself, but they're the super banks, the interbank market. Banks like Citigroup, JP Morgan, UBS, Barclays, Deutsche Bank, and HSBC, Hong Kong Bank. Under that are the big commercial companies that need to hedge their commercial risk. And then there are governments and central banks: European Central Bank, Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, Bank of Canada, Royal Bank of Australia, Royal Bank of New Zealand, or Reserve Bank of New Zealand, Bank of Japan, and the Swiss National Bank. You always have to be watching them because they will make adjustments to their interest rates to control inflation, and that radically affects the valuation of a currency over long periods of time. Some of the best trades that you can make happen shortly before or after an interest rate change or an expected change that doesn't materialize. BabyPip says that sometimes central banks think that their currency is priced too high or too low. Well, rare. It's very rare for a central bank to think that its currency is priced too low. But there are exceptions, like for countries that are on the brink of economic collapse, like Turkey. Right now, I know there's another run going on the Turkish lira against the US dollar. But Turkey has put in place some measures to try to combat this speculation, including extremely high swap rates. It's still pretty much a safe trade. The US dollar is going to crush the Turkish lira. And I don't know. I'm not a fortune teller. I don't have a crystal ball, but it would only take the collapse of the lira or for one of the European Union countries to start having some credit issues to start this whole ball rolling south again. I don't think that we have seen the end of the turmoil in the markets, even though things have sort of paused for a while. All right, under the major players, at the bottom of the major players are the big speculators. And BabyPips again says that this is 90% of the volume of the Forex market, which I don't believe is true. Check out that video where I talk about what I think really constitutes most of the volume in Forex. Forex history. So after World War II, economies were not stable. The Western governments said we need to meet and figure this thing out. They got together at a ski resort in New Hampshire. What was it called? The Washington Hotel or something, which is in a place called Bretton Woods in New Hampshire. So this is still called the Bretton Woods system. And they agreed to set the exchange rate of the US dollar against gold, which allowed the other currencies to peg their exchange rates against the US dollar. And that worked quite well for a while. But as some economies grew and some didn't grow as quickly, the different rates of the system became limiting. Or I should say, the same rates became limiting. And it really reminds me of another collective currency which is having the same issues, where some economies like Germany grow much more quickly than others, like Greece and Ireland and Portugal. And so, thinking about that, you have a pretty good understanding of why the euro continues to slide day after day after day, despite the positive carry trade. In 1971, or was it 73? I think it was 73. Nixon abolishes the gold standard and the Bretton Woods system is abandoned. But the decline of the Bretton Woods system started before Nixon made his choice to abandon the gold standard. And then 20 years later, you started seeing the first retail Forex brokers. I think Oanda was the first one. They're still in existence. They're still one of the biggest, if not the biggest, sort of retail. I guess interactive brokers would have to be considered bigger, but interactive brokers are sort of in a category of their own. Retail brokers come in a couple of different flavors according to BabyPips, but I'm going to take issue with one of the points made here. Market makers set their own bid and ask prices. That's true. And then electronic communication networks or straight through processing brokers use bid ask prices from different institutions in interbank markets. But in practice, I am going to suggest that most brokers don't have the luxury of simply matching trader bid and ask prices or to find prices from different institutions. Almost every ECN and STP broker that you can find uh, has to act as a counterparty and carry their own inventory. And most of them are broker dealers. They're not just making trades for you, but also trading their own accounts. And so they're making profits. An ECN, in theory, should only be making profit on commissions. A market maker should only be making profit on spreads. But in practice, every broker has the ability to pad their spread and to share profits with their upstream providers. So I would say there's no such thing as a ECN broker as it's understood in Forex, the way it's understood in other markets. ECN means something in stocks when you're buying stocks. ARCA is an ECN dealer, but in Forex, they're a strange hybrid. They might call themselves ECN because it's sort of a popular marketing buzzword, but there's no such thing. They make profits on spreads and commissions. And they are the counterparty, and they are trading against you. So basically, they're all market makers, even if they are using a different liquidity provider. Market makers are the fundamental building blocks of the FX market. I don't really know what that means, but I thought it was important to put in there. I guess that's true. I mean, without them, the market couldn't exist. They repackaged large contracts from wholesalers, and if that didn't happen, there wouldn't be enough liquidity for speculators to engage in the market trade. ECNs, as I mentioned, they're electronic communications networks. They theoretically match customers' buy and sell orders at quote unquote stated prices. I'm not sure what that means. These prices are gathered from different market makers, banks, and other traders in theory. And due to the ability of traders to set their own prices, what I have no idea what that means at all. I mean, I get what they're trying to say is that because traders are making trades with other traders and buys and sells are being matched by the ECN, you're essentially setting your own price. But in practice, you're not really setting your own price. And I don't believe that there's enough liquidity in any pair to fully ensure that trades are being matched trader to trader. I think that's why I put a red X beside this. It says ECN brokers typically charge a very small commission for the trades you take. Well, what do you consider very small? Is this very small in 1990s terms or very small in compared to the commissions charged by brokers in equities? I mean, now you've got brokers like Robinhood that don't charge commissions. There's zero commission brokers, not difficult to find. So this statement, they're very small commissions with an ECN broker, I have a big problem with. The combination of tight spreads and small commissions usually make transaction costs cheaper on ECN brokers. Again, I really think it varies from broker to broker. I think they're all market makers in Forex. And I don't think that you can say that ECN brokers necessarily have better transaction costs. I don't think that's true anymore. All right. That is chapter 4 of BabyPips.